us to see each other. And just there we go. Welcome, everyone, to day 11 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and every day for the next 20 days now, I will be talking to top doctors and other healthcare professionals, as well as people who have survived cancer, who will be giving you insights on how you too can thrive, even in the face of cancer. Today's guest is a legend in the world of nutrition and particularly in the plant-based world. He needs no introduction. He is plant-based royalty, none other than Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who will be discussing whether or not there is a relationship between nutrition and cancer. It is my honor to welcome him to the show. It is so great to see you, Dr. Campbell. How have you been?
I've been fine, more or less. I mean, at 90 years is not the same as it was at 10, but it's good.
Well, I feel like you are thriving, and you haven't even caught up to Dr. Esselstyn yet.
Yeah, just 3 months behind.
That,
Yeah,
yeah, well, we can't wait for your birthday in March. So this is your passion, this topic, isn't it, Dr. Campbell?
been a long time. Yes, it has. And thank you for that intro. You're very kind.
Yep. Well, you are a superstar. So, would you like to just start with your presentation, or you want to just talk about how you got so interested in this?
Well, I'm going to talk about that question. So we kill two birds with one stone.
Well, we're vegan, so we don't want to say kill two birds with one stone. We want to say feed two birds with one seed.
Okay, do it that way.
All right.
Okay, let's start here then. And that's this relationship that we're talking about, namely nutrition and cancer. And, it's kind of a funny question. I feel like AJ, you and you folks and our colleagues, we know this fairly well, but, there's an awful lot of people that find this kind of strange to even ask the question. They don't realize that, nutrition does relate to cancer. And I spent my whole darn career on this question, accidentally, by the way. They do it on purpose. So let's go. Let's get started on this, then. Uh, okay. So for me, this started, as I say, accidentally. And my background was such that it was not in accord with what I'm going to be saying here. So I got to go talk about something in the background a bit because it does bear a relationship to what the main point is. Uh, I went to Cornell and so forth, and somehow had the occasion to get involved in doing a project in the Philippines with a senior man, professor at Virginia Tech University, and he wanted me to look after a project he had on childhood malnutrition. And I saw a lot of these cases. This picture here is a regretful page. I saw them in Haiti and the Philippines and elsewhere. Big problem in the world, at least a big problem in terms of the way people talk about it. So I want to tell you how I got into this question concerning the relationship between nutrition and cancer, as I say, accidentally. And at the time that I was there was a thought sort of circulating in our professional community that among the malnourished children in the world, the thing they needed most, I didn't know the difference, the thing they needed most was to make sure they get enough protein. And that generally meant protein from animal sources. Okay. So it presented quite a contrast to what we ended up doing. Uh, in any case, I'm going to show here a couple of things that relate to my bias, if you will, because I had to live with it and deal with it, from the very beginning. I was raised on a farm, milking cows. Milked the first cow when I was only 5 years old, but my father had a dairy farm, obviously, and so milking cows, gave us milk that I drank, and to the extent that I heard of it at all, and I didn't hear too much about it, milk was really important. kids need to drink milk and it's got protein, it's got this and that. So I heard that enough. And so then I gradually learned over time that the reason that milk was important is because it really had protein. It also had calcium too. So those are the two big things that people in the public would know. And this just shows me here we're combining grain, self-propelled combine, and it's me. I'm sitting in the driver's seat there. That's my dad standing up as the seat. My mom is standing down near the part where it cuts the stuff, and a couple of brothers I have. And in any case, that's what it all was about. And we're cutting grain, and we did that for a living for a while too. Because sorry, the phone here. So we cut that, on custom combine. It was called for income, for some revenue. And the grain that we were cutting primarily in those days was for feeding livestock. It's consistent with just what we do. And livestock, by that I mean cows, pigs, chickens, all the rest. And it was said to be, I didn't even hear the word protein hardly at all, but nonetheless, it was to produce protein-rich meat, milk, and eggs for human food. That's what it was. And so eventually, and I'm skipping over some years here, I eventually went off to Cornell University to do my doctoral dissertation where we had to do research. And this research that I did there was funded by a couple of organizations that my two professors had arranged for at the time. And it was a project that I'm showing here that was done in between 1956 and 62, basically to feed to animals a nitrogen-containing compound that was a waste product, quite frankly, of companies like DuPont and so forth, a waste product, a nitrogen-containing compound that the cows would eat. And the question was, can their organisms in their rumen, the big gut, can they actually use that nitrogen-containing compound and convert it into protein, if you will? I mean, it's just everyday almost language on the farm in a sense that, this is what we're doing. And so I did that, worked on it, and that was in fact, quite frankly, to encourage the consumption of more protein, produce the cows in more efficient ways, chicks, whatever, and get the protein. So after that, and doing a postdoc at MIT, I did my undergraduate work at Cornell and I went to MIT. Then I ended up recruited to come to Virginia Tech University. And there, the director of the department, a really wonderful man, is Dr. Charles Engel. He wanted me, and the reason he had recruited me from MIT, he wanted me to come with him to the Philippines to organize a project basically feeding malnourished children. It sounded quite exciting to me. So that's what it was, and primarily it was for the purpose of making sure these kids got enough protein. I saw a lot of dreadful cases like this, left almost a scar, but it certainly left a very important memory on my brain for all the years since. This was started in 1965 after I finished my first research, one for 10 years, and then I came to Cornell. But okay, so this is all tied into the concept of get these children more protein. And of course, I was in charge of that project at the time, so I was very sensitive to the interests of this. The dairy industry in the United States was sort of shipping dried milk powder all over the world, especially to poor countries, so that their children could get enough protein. That's the way we supposedly, and that was their view, the way you solve malnutrition problem in children is to make sure they get enough good protein. And the way to do that was to, offer to them dried milk powder, as I said. They sent it by shiploads. So there in the Philippines, not long after I started, I saw this paper in 1968, published in scientific literature, It was a study that was done in India. They showed this, and it was kind of striking. Namely, this is an animal study, and these researchers at the time were interested in what effect protein had on, of all things, cancer. Now, cancer was initiated with this compound called aflatoxin, AF in this particular case. And what they showed here, and as I say, it was published, so met the standards of good research. So they had two groups of animals. One group, both of them got the aflatoxin. The aflatoxin is what causes liver cancer. One of them, though, got 20% protein, the other 5%. They actually thought that they would see better results by feeding animals higher protein. And so that's what they did. And I think it was, I forget how long it was, maybe about 6 months or so. But at that time, all of the animals, 30 out of 30, and the ones fed the animal protein, all of them got the cancer. They got the same amount of the cancer compound that causes cancer. So it was 100% in the ones getting the 20% protein, that's 20% of calories, as opposed to the other group that was fed at a lower level. Enough protein, by the way, but 5% of total calories. And so there were the results that were published, and that I saw at the time that I'm supposed to kind of tune into this idea, if you will, and make sure that we use protein too. But 100 nothing score is pretty significant, to say the least. There was no doubting about that. But when I saw it, coming back to my background again, two ways. First, personally on the farm, milking cows. Secondly, actually doing a doctorate dissertation. In effect, advancing the consumption of more animal protein. So this was just totally the opposite. Here in this particular case, the animal says it's 20% protein. They're the ones that got the cancer. All of them did. And the ones that got much less, none did. I mean, that turns one's head. I mean, you can't really doubt it. And except the researchers themselves, they didn't believe that. They went back and did another study to try to show the opposite. But they did it in such a way, technically speaking, that didn't make a lot of sense. So I saw this year, I knew that later, that they were coming out with these results. I had a decision to make. Do we use protein, dried milk powder, for example, like that, for these children, when in fact, in the face of this evidence here, that's a pretty powerful effect. So I, of course, met some colleagues and some friends and stuff like that, and was working with them. And it turned out that I met a couple of colleagues. These are physicians, by the way. One was the advisor to the president of the country, Ferdinand Marcos. So very significant individuals. But it turns out that we went golfing one day and they were just asking me, what am I doing in their country? And we started chatting about that and started talking about the malnourished children. And they had worked with some of these children themselves as doctors. And they told me that there are some children who are more likely to get liver cancer were consuming the most protein. And of course, now that's certain there's not many consuming protein, but we had access to data, and there were few individuals in that population that were eating like us Westerners, and they were the ones more likely to get liver cancer. These are children that were documented, and they were about 4 years of age at the time. And so here were children getting liver cancer and dying. And the impression was that they might be getting protein. And so I kind of checked around with the data we had, with the data that was in the that was available to us, as well as talking to people, that this looked like it might be true. The children who were dying at such a young age, I thought it was due to the carcinogen, the aflatoxin. But it turned out that the impression I got from the information we had, not much at the time, was such that the few families with the most protein among all these poor people, they were the ones to most likely get the liver cancer. So all of a sudden, between the Indian work and what I saw in Manila and Philippines, was more or less the same thing. So the few families consuming the most protein, their children are more likely to get liver cancer and die. There were children 4 years of age or so on average the national books, if you will, that were done. So it was a very serious matter. And of course, at that point in time, we're supposed to go ahead forward with us, creating our own malnourished children project, but and then use protein. But then I saw this. I personally, I did not quite believe it because coming from the farm, when doctor dissertation, I was totally 100% in the camp of everyone else. This is crazy, and so I had to deal with it. There was no other way. Again, I'm not going to be doing something like that, be responsible for something like that. So I had to come home and Virginia Tech and do some studies on this. And the studies that I was doing was strictly according to the rules of science. And the definition of science that I came to know over the years, I really liked, made the whole venture worthwhile. Namely, and this has been said quite a number of times recently, it's germane, especially these days. We all own opinions. I think we can all agree to it. But we don't own facts. This is the distinction. Everybody's got an opinion about this, that, and anything else, but not many people really know what the real facts are. The only way one can sort of converse with facts is to do experimentation to see what really works and what don't. And it's done in such a way that we control our own biases, the institutions of which we are a part, their biases may be controlled. So science for me was almost like a religion. It was structured in such a way that we learn things by doing it right, and we control our biases. We control our institution biases as well. And for me, being in science at that point in time, I found it just a really wonderful sort of concept, controlling my own biases as well as, having other people control bias that I might be accustomed to. So now I'm going to show you some of the results we got. I had to tell you that background because, mind you, what I ended up doing here was strictly a scientific initiative. I was biased the other way around. Let me show you what we got. It became so convincing. This is a publication we finally came out with this some years later in 1991, 92. But what it shows here is that we're watching cancer grow in animals, in this case, sperm or rats, like the Indian workers have done. And so I was watching these cancers form in the first 12 weeks. And so all cancers really start with, so it's said, starts with a mutation of the DNA. And so the aflatoxin I told you about before that tends to be present in peanuts and corn and so forth, that's a very powerful carcinogen. Very powerful carcinogen. So in this particular case, we start out, these animals are exposed to a carcinogen, and we feed them 20% protein. You can see there the cancer is growing quite well. In contrast, the animals fed 5% not growing at all. That was striking. I mean, I think you would agree, whether you're science or not, to get something like that and see it, you don't doubt it. No matter how many times you do it, that's what you get. So it shows that the higher levels of protein, which incidentally is near somewhat a little bit higher, but not too far off from what humans consume. What it showed is that protein in this particular case, there was protein of all things in milk. It was casein, to be specific. And so we feed the animals 20% of total calories, and both groups are got exposed to the carcinogen, very powerful carcinogen. Only animals fed 20% protein actually grew the cancer. The animals fed 5% did not. So, I'm getting a partial answer already to some doubt I had. The Indian work seemed to be real. This was something here. Now let me show you some characteristics about some of the work we did over the next couple of years. First off, I had to get money for this, and I need to tell this because it's kind of a controversial topic, to say the least. I got the money from NIH. You had to appeal for it. It's very competitive. We got the money, got a good review on it, and I had to redo it for the next 30 years. So NIH funded most of the research I was doing. American Cancer Society did a little bit, American Institute for Cancer Research, and so forth. So this was funded by very standard, upscale cancer research organizations. So here, let me just show you a little one of the early questions that I had. So all the cancers in both groups of animals they get a genetic mutation. The genes have been mutated, so now they're in a position to actually grow the cancer. The only animals that 20% did the cancers grow. And this is just during the first 12 weeks. But then I was just curious, and I'll see in a moment why we did this. After 12 weeks, there's no cancers here in the 5%. I decided to give them 20%, see what would happen. In other words, in a sense, I'm looking to see if in fact those animals remembered, their mutations that had formed earlier on. Sure enough, they did. I mean, these animals had been exposed to a carcinogen back here in the beginning, and the XY axis, and give them 20% and turn that cancer on. So in other words, the genes are lying around. They've been mutated. They're prepared to cause cancer if the conditions are right. In this case, just giving them 20% protein. That's all it took. So then it led to yet another question, and I'm going to show you the set of data. 20% would turn it on. Okay. Then we came in with a 5% diet, turned it off. Get back to 20%, turned it on and off. We did this in various sundry ways. And what this demonstrated was something really striking. In other words, the animals that had gotten a mutation to get the cancer, liver cancer in this case, to get the cancer, we could regulate whether or not the cancer really grew to what it would become, just by nutritional means. This is very exciting. This was actually published some years later in the 1990s. But in any case, that was striking. Began to remove some doubt from me, as to whether or not that ending work was right. Eventually, some years later, just as a side, I was invited to India to tell the story we did to that group. It was the Indian Nutrition Research Group in Delhi, but it was all quite exciting and interesting, because to say that animal protein, not plant protein, animal protein turns on cancer, that's a big story in anybody's language, and wherever it may be. So now I'm going to show you right here, just to add more weight to that observation. Namely, we give 20% first release, the cancers are growing. Switch to 5%, turn it off. Turn it back on again, turn it off. So cancer is not just a matter of, screwing up our genes, with carcinogens. That's not it. That can, we all get exposed to carcinogens from time to time in our lifetimes, from all sorts of things. But whether the cancer grows or not really has a lot to do, at least in this case, it has to do with nutrition. So cancer, instead of being a genetic disease, is now a nutritional disease. So and this is why the industry in this country and elsewhere were considered at the time, now to these days, even more so. And I'll tell you why. Most people in this field think of cancer as a genetic disease. It comes from their genes. And in a sense, it's sort of correct. It's a mutated gene, of course, and there's some chemicals that they may be exposed to from time to time that turns on those cells, a few cells, to become potential cancer cells. Okay? We call that initiation. And then, the second thought to keep in mind, that I was aware of at the time, mutations once formed, and they're going to hang around, could hang around for lifetimes. They pass on to daughter cells and so forth. They kind of hang around. So these mutations, you would think the body would find a way to reverse them, get rid of them. Well, it turns out that doesn't work very well. When we get a mutated gene and some new cells form with this gene, they don't come back. They don't reverse very easily. They're quite rare, those occasions. So once you get exposed to it, they're going to be around for a lifetime. Depends on whether or not allergists say whether we feed the cancer or not. We have know something about the nutrition that feeds the cancer. And so with the idea that the cancer is a genetic disease, only genes, that's what the system sort of says. Still says it today. I'm telling you this because this is a big idea that is sacrosanct almost, an entire cancer community. The cancer starts with these odd chemicals we get exposed to from time to time. We cause mutations, and there we're gone. No, it's not the way it is. We all get exposed, and we, make some cancer genes, if you will, from time to time. But if we just rely on the idea it's a genetic disease, that means we can't get rid of it. Can't go backwards. So what that leads to in the community, the cancer community, for all these years since, has led to the idea that the only way to bring cancer under control is to use chemotherapy or radiotherapy or surgery. And there's quite a history on that. And I really got quite involved in really beginning to understand that history over this. This is back to at least the surgery of breast cancer in women. It goes back to the early 1800s. The radiotherapy came along in about the late 1800s. And then the chemotherapy was offered as an opportunity to find some chemicals that could kill the cancer cells. That's chemo, as we know it. And they started with some strange ideas in the very beginning in the 19-teens and 1920s. The first being was to use colloidal lead, of all things. Lead is very toxic, but they started out using some colloidal lead to treat cancer patients, and that was a ridiculous idea, but that was part of the game plan. Try to come up with some way to remove the cancer that won't go backwards itself. So the whole industry then circled around that because they could get a lot of money for these ways of doing things. Surgery was pretty much among breast cancer. Women was breast cancer, although eventually it became also used in other cancers as well. So I'm just putting this down in what I've sort of already said. I'm suggesting that for me, at least in my career, there's a new belief here possibly that nobody's really considering. Because as the evidence started acquiring, at least the evidence we were doing, and some other evidence I was learned from other people, the more recent evidence was beginning to show that mutation was not just it. Further cancer development can be controlled by nutrition. Thus, quite frankly, cancer, like heart disease and kidney disease and so forth, really have a very strong nutritional component. It depends on what we do nutritionally as to whether or not we get the cancer. Mind you, everything I say here, these are the summaries of impressions and evidence and stuff like that. It doesn't mean every single person is going to get, as I suggest. But this, by way and by all means, cancer is basically a nutritional disease. Although some people may in fact get it from other sources, like bad nutrition, if you will. So nutrition can be controlled, as we know. And so that's what I had come to realize, is that if we could just change our diet or use the right diet in the first place, we could control things like cancer, as well as other diseases. And I'll come back to that in a moment, the kind of diet that works that way. And what this basically means, and I'll show you why in a moment, is that I'm talking about the protein from animals. Here's a big, at this point, here's a big story. Because animal food, where we get the protein from, and a lot of people think that's about the only place we get it from. That's not true. Protein is in plants too. But when we started testing early in my career, animal food and animal protein, plant food, this is specific for animal protein, not plant protein. And so this all of a sudden makes a huge distinction, if for no other reason, a difference between the nutritional value of animal foods versus plant foods. And that's why I showed you my background. I mean, as I say, it took some doing for me to just begin to suddenly see the data for what it is. In other words, look at the science. If you do it right and you remove all your biases, that's what it comes out to be. So there's no mistaking about this. The animal protein turns it on. So the next question then that came to mind over the years was, how does this work biochemically? I'm in nutritional biochemistry myself, and we like to know, what is the so-called mechanism? How does this darn thing work? Which kind of biochemical reactions are responsible for a cell becoming cancerous, and which kind of reactions are responsible for those cells to divide, 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 and eventually become a cancer cell. So this, incidentally, this question is typical, is germane almost to the entire medical community and all kinds of issues concerning diet, disease, and other sorts of things. We want to know what the mechanism is. If we can get a mechanism, guess what? This gives reason to hope that we might be able to find another chemical to control it, maybe reverse it. That is the fundamental basis for the pharmaceutical industry. As we said before, chemotherapy and radiotherapy are two ways of doing it, and the other is surgery in many cases. So I set about, in my lab with my graduate students to look for the mechanism. Now, how do we explain this odd protein thing? This is crazy. And I said, for just a moment ago, we tried soy and wheat protein too. This is all published. It's all funded by NIH, as I say. So it's just not a happenstance kind of observation. This is real science. Other people, started seeing results. Soy and wheat protein did not increase that precancer development, even when they're fed at 20% calories. That's a huge observation. Animal protein, in this case, casein, could turn on cancer. Plant proteins did not. And I'm looking for the mechanism. The reason I want to look for the mechanism is very typical in science. If we have a mechanism and we know what it is, we can make a drug and just control things that way. That's the birth, essentially, and that's the life of the entire drug industry. That we can identify what is the specific way that something happens that we don't like, that might lead to disease, might kill us. All we need to do is find a chemical and put it in a bottle and whatever, and bring it under control. That has become, quite frankly, the centerpiece of modern medicine for some decades now, for a long time. And that's where the life support comes for the entire drug industry, making chemicals. I'll come back to that a little later on. So then the question is, why do animal proteins do this, not plant proteins? That's a big question, because what in our hands, I'm just sort of learning as going along, and there's nothing because I'm questioning my own thoughts as well as other people's. That turns out that we're looking for how does animal protein turn this on, because that's what's doing it, animal protein. Now I'm going to show you here, and I don't want this to be too complicated, confusing, but it's really key. And this reflects some research that we were doing with a number of students I had, graduate students, I should say, who were earning their PhDs. And so in this attempt, over a period of about 12 to 15 years, I was sort of giving each graduate student an opportunity to do their doctoral dissertation research on looking for one of these mechanisms. Now, to explain this, I've shown you here two pictures of how cancer works. There's a schematic. Cancer, generally speaking, been sort of considered this way since the 1930s. Cancer, we divided it up just for convenience into 3 different stages. Initiation, this is when, for example, let's say a chemical comes in and causes a genetic mutation. That's all what this is about in the early stages, converting a normal cell to a cancer cell. After that, once that cell's been mutated, the gene's been changed, then it goes through years of life, if you will, for individuals. In the case of humans, we call it promotion. This is where once the cell's mutated, now it has the potential, now it has the information to become cancerous. And so these cells start dividing, for over some years of time, maybe years of time, actually, but it's quite a long period. And then finally, somebody gets diagnosed with it. If it's a real diagnosis, I should say. They get diagnosed with the cancer. And at that time, it's kind of light, change the color, it's kind of red and dangerous. And this is when the really serious stuff happens. So a lot of times we can be growing cancers just because we have a mutated cells and not know it. We don't really know it. But I was interested in learning, with this remarkable protein effect from animal foods. I was interested in where is the darn mechanism for this. At that time, I was officially registered in the pharmaceutical community of researchers. So, I was living by the typical way we think in pharmacological research. Looking at the mechanism. And what I'm showing here, I'm showing two pictures, the same thing. Top and bottom, it's the same thing. I'm showing the three stages. Initiation, that's when the mutation is forming. Secondly, the cells are dividing in other ways. And the last is when it's getting mad and nasty. Now it's metastasizing. And so I've just listed here a bunch of mechanisms. Each one of these is a lot of work. And, usually requires 3 or 4, even 5 years of research on the part of, let's say, a graduate student. So, and yet I'm listing here, as you can see, some mechanisms. One for the first stage, and then some for the second stage. And one something here really quite remarkable. I'm showing here a list. And I don't want to get bogged down too much of the technicalities of this. But blocking the screen. First off, we noticed that the animals fed the higher animal protein diet, getting into cancer, it increased the rate of entry of the chemical carcinogen or the mutagen into the cell. Oh, you say that. That's all you need to know. If we could get a drug and block the entry of carcinogen into a cell, we'll take that. We won't get any cancer. That's the way that the pharmaceutical people think. But we found that, moved on. I say I had a number of graduate students in the big group at the time. Each one of them, you're doing something new. And I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. We're looking for the mechanism. Here's one possibility. Now, when a carcinogen comes into our cells, it's going to cause a mutation. It does so with the assistance of an enzyme called mixed function oxidase, MFO. So the cell, the ones getting higher protein, there's more carcinogen coming into the cell. They get metabolized, those carcinogens get metabolized, and then produce a product that binds to the DNA, and that's what we call initiation. That's the danger. That's where the mutation occurs. And it turns out the enzyme doing that, the high protein diet increases that enzyme activity to do that. Wow. Now protein is doing two things, both of them leading to cancer. One of them bringing more cancer into the cell, the other, elevating the enzyme level to do that. And this, incidentally, back here in just this top chart, it's just back in the initial stages of initiation. So I listed here increases cells, increases. Okay, let me go some more. Keep on looking, not knowing. We're just looking for this elusive mechanism because there's an opportunity for making a drug, let's say. It also, the high protein diet changes this very complex structure of this enzyme. You see, it's exceedingly complex. I don't want to get into the details of this, but it changed the structure in such a way that it led to the possibility of things progressing to cancer. Also, then we actually measured this, the presence of mutations. So the high protein diet increases mutations that causes the cancers to have now a lifetime, being able to form cancer. These normal cells are kind of lying around, and we can have mutations in our body. We get them all the time, but some of them are not so good. And we get some mutations kind of lying around with the potential to cause cancer if the condition is right. But then normally under normal circumstances, our body is a marvelous machine in a way of being able to correct things going wrong. It's had a few million years knowing how to do this. And so we have in our systems some mechanisms to repair any mutations. We call it the technical things called DNA repair. So what we found in the in these studies that we did, lo and behold, these are all increased activities. Verse 4, this one here is decreased. So here is like a handful above of Mother Nature, whatever she's doing, that when we eat animal protein, it decreases our ability to repair the mutation that would otherwise lead to cancer. So we got four things, five things. 4 of them are increased. Each of this is a lot of work. It takes 3 or 4 or 5, even 6 or 7 years to do a study like this. different ways of having set it up. So the high protein diet increases all these four things that lead to cancer. It decreases this one that we have in our bodies that are kind of helping us out. So the animal protein is destroying our body's own ability to take care of its own affairs. So then we started looking at the second phase. Now, mind you, the second phase here is reversible. In those days, no one was entertaining that idea, but that's what we were doing. We could turn cancer on all just by the kind of protein that was being fed, and then help them first. So we started looking for some mechanisms there, and look, let's see what we found. The high protein diet increased the rate at which cells divide. Well, that's going to bias us toward cancer. It's going to, increase the rate at which these mutated cells are going to increase, accumulate, and eventually, get together and form a tumor. There you have it. That's one way. It also did something kind of odd. This is done in some other colors of mine too. This O2, I couldn't sort of type it right way, but it's called reactive oxygen. Oxygen is good for us, obviously, but in our bodies, this kind of oxygen molecule also can be formed of so-called what we call reactive radicals, and they spill out in the blood. They in turn cause cancer to move forward. Just they all by themselves increases the rate at which cells divide. Well, that's going to increase risk. And then something else that high protein diet did. It increased the presence of a growth hormone, an important growth hormone, which automatically, when we have, for any reason whatsoever, if we have growth hormones in our bloodstream start to increase, it's going to cause some mischief. So this is increasing the rate at which these cells divide. That's going to lead to cancer. And then finally, this is really kind of exciting here. This last one, we found another one where all these others are increased except for one. Another, we have our immune system mechanisms to form, they call them T cells, that actually kill cancer cells. That's what they're there for. This became of interest recently in the recent COVID story. You have heard of this, and hoping they're going to get a drug for doing that. It doesn't quite work that way. But in any case, what the high protein diet does, this is something to protect us. And it actually decreased these cells. So the body is less capable of taking care of its own affairs. Mind you, all these bottom four are for the second phase of promotion. So finally, for me at least, excuse me, you got all these mechanisms. And each one of them taking quite a lot of time. And after about, as I talk, sitting here, something like that, I realized when I had another student who sort of shepherd through our program, I was trying to figure out, what can this person do? And I started looking at all the things we had done. So wait a minute, here's a bunch of mechanisms. They all do the same thing. I mean, they're doing something very different, a very different line of attack, if you will. Every one of these, all 8 of them went up in activity, 2 of them went down, but all 10 of them did the same thing. They were actually increasing with the presence of animal protein. They're increasing the risk of cancer. This is really an odd thing here because now, how in the world can we pick out one of these and say, I'll go make a drug for that. I'll get a drug to stop that, and I'll stop the disease. And so that's the way the drug industry works. The drug industry, the pharmaceutical industry actually looks for things like this kind of information. And they can find one thing and I got myself, I get a chemical. Usually it's a synthesized chemical. And so they have a new drug. This is such a big story here because this is the way Mother Nature works, pulling all these things together to do her job. But we can come along and decide we're going to do better. We're going to find out one mechanism, and we're going to take some chemical to destroy one of these, or we're going to do the opposite. This is the pharmaceutical industry, right here, in a nutshell, multiplied by a few thousand-fold. But it sort of suggested to me a concept we hadn't really known before. And that was that maybe we don't need drugs to control this disease. Since they're all synthetic, they're likely to be toxic. There's also have our side effects. We have to live with that. So, like, this is almost, at least for a way, I'm thinking about things at the roots of the pharmaceutical industry. And somehow, Mother Nature knows what she's doing. Leave her alone. She knows how to turn all these mechanisms up, one increase or decrease, and accomplish good health if we do the right thing. And it turns out all these, as I say, 8 of them increased in activity, 2 decreased, and they should have been increased. The others should have been decreased, they should have been increased. All 10 of them did the same thing in reference to cancer. It pushed the development of cancer. Now you could say, and this I'm sure it happens, on occasion, just one of these things goes wrong in a person, or 2, or whatever, and maybe they could deal with it. The body's able to repair it. But in reality, we don't deal with those things so well. And so what we do, we go into the whole business of making drugs to cure all of our illnesses. And for something like cancer, a very complex disease, it should not be taken so simply. All these things here are going on in the background as we sort of arrive at the point we get a cancer. That, to me, led to a very different concept of what nutrition really is. The animal proteins doing all these things. And one more thing, really important. As we increase the intake of animal foods to get that protein, we do it subconsciously. 99% of people probably do it subconsciously, but we think the animal food is good, milk, meat, and eggs, so we do that. And when we do that, we have less room for the plant foods. So what happens when we get into a situation where we just love our animal foods, these other kinds of foods, what we're doing, we're changing 2 things, 2 major things. We're increasing animal foods, that means animal protein. We're decreasing plant foods. And the plant foods got a lot of good stuff in them. Oxidants and this and that, fibers and stuff, a ton of things, thousands of them, millions of things. So two things are going on. Just on the mere hit, on the mere thought, we need to consume animal food to get that good protein. That's why I had to tell you my own background, because I came from that same community too, both personally and professionally. The animal protein is good. We need that. No, when you see this kind of stuff, pretty quick. That's it. And that's what happens. And so I just found this whole area of work should be really exciting. And of course, part of the cancer process is looking back here again. We could turn cancer on and off. And the reason we were able to turn cancer on and off was because all these mechanisms change, work together in synchrony. I mean, I call this Mother Nature. She's had a few million years to learn how to do this. And all of them are some increase, some decrease, thousands more kinds of mechanisms, all working together to create health. All we need to do is eat the right diet. And the diet basically is one, for the most part, is driven for the major part in the fact of whether or not we eat animal foods. So my foods that I was raised on and lived by and learned by was actually wrong. That's why I say lives have to deal with that. You can't walk away from this kind of information. This is the real thing. Okay. Oh, there's one more I showed you then in the bottom. It changes the rate of calories. This is kind of complicated here, but the animal protein changes the rate in which we use calories. But it does it in such a way it increases cancer there too. Now, let me say one thing just in passing, because I have to come back to this, especially in these days, all the time. People will come along and tell you, either scientists or especially physicians, read something or hear something, and they'll tell you about one thing here that may be going wrong, and you got to take a drug for this, that, or something else. I don't buy that. That's really avoiding, knowledge of what really is going on. So let's now I'll show you schematically a little bit what I'm talking about. talk about all these mechanisms. Here's a normal cell, and here's a cancer cell. And normal cells keep dividing, and they produce all kinds of cells, usually mimicking their own, their offspring are the same as what the parent cells are like. But in this particular case, as I said, animal protein increases the amount of carcinogen comes to the cell, and then it that carcinogen comes to the cell, gets activated by this enzyme, and it binds to DNA. Now we've got a damaged gene. That's what really happened. And so, and animal protein does all the things in the wrong way. Plant protein doesn't do this. This is what's very key about this. And so now they have the damaged DNA, we call that a mutation. And we got one mechanism to repair that. But animal protein says, hey, cut that out. That's one. And down here, and we form these NK cells and the T cells I told you about before. Cancer, they go through a whole series of steps. And I just put little stars here for each event that we actually measure. Just shows that all these sort of asterisks are working together to create the response that we have sometimes get. Sometimes, one or two of these may go wrong and cause the end problem. We don't usually know what they are. And if we just use drugs to just stop one of them and not deal with the others, we're not going to get very far. That's why nutrition, when we're consuming animal protein, to do all these things at the same time, and lots more, in the wrong way, together with plant-based foods, do the opposite. So that's a combination of animal and plant. And I just found this notion really, very not only convincing, just very exciting, very promising, because it shows what nutrition can do by just doing that. Don't eat animal foods, cut down animal protein. We don't need it for this purpose. And in the process, increase plant foods, and all of it works together. Beautiful sort of system. So I come up with this concept called holistic nutrition. Now, most of the research is done in this area of science and medicine is focused on one thing at a time, as I've emphasized several times. It does one mechanism, one nutrient, one this, one that, and that is the medical system. You know that there's not a medical school in the country that teaches nutrition? And I'm going outside of my own bounds a little bit here to talk about nutrition. It's not the result of just a nutrient here, a nutrient there, doing their special thing. I don't believe in that. That might work in the short run, but doesn't work in the long run. So nutrient supplementation means very little to me. That's just really strongly indicated. I call it whole nutrition with a W, just to say that eat the food the way we were intended to eat the food. Eat the whole food. And let all these things work their magic together. With multiple nutrients, a bunch of mechanisms, a lot of disease reversals, health improvements, and so forth and so on. It comes to this concept, whole food plant-based. I'm the one that actually came up with those words back in the 70s when I was on a committee determining with some colleagues who's going to get the funding, who's not. And I didn't want to explain nutrition the way it conventionally had been explained. Like this nutrient does this and this one does that. That's all. The whole system is really it's just nature working together. So I like the word plant-based. I didn't care for the vegetarian word at the time because that was not my motivation. That's one way to look at it, I suppose. But it's not. Mistakes are made, in that community, scientifically, all through the same thing. So anyhow, this brings up this concept. It's a very, very large concept. I'm talking about cancer, learning it all that way. But quite frankly, it's a system that applies to all kinds of diseases. It applies to heart disease, it applies to chronic kidney disease, diabetes, all these diseases we call chronic degenerative diseases. They tend to more often than not occur later in life. So they're kind of age dependent, if you will. And they all work together. Far, far beyond, I showed you a simple system here. Believe it or not, this is really kind of a simple system compared to what nature's done. Mother Nature knew what she was doing. And it really comes down to there's one way to handle all these going on at the same time. Eat plants and try to eat them whole food. And by trying to, use supplements of some sort to do the same job, it's not a good idea. I really got quite involved with that myself at the governmental level. And so, there was an attempt to try to, the industry was wanting to sell supplements, and I was asked to be the one to come along and question the concepts. So I got very close to it. And I really came to believe that this idea of eating whole food, just plants, and it doesn't make much difference which plant, just a variety of plants. And so, the Chinese diet or Indian diet or whatever, just as long as you eat whole plants, and different parts of the plant are probably all useful at least at times. Probably the leafy parts of the plants is probably as good as any. And the fruiting bodies, fruits and vegetables and leafy parts is the best thing to do. I just put this table here, just showing you some evidence from all kinds of sources. All of these diseases respond the same way, essentially, to this idea of getting close to, a plant-based diet. I just mentioned some before, and this is the old 9 yards almost. The right kind of food, we're going to get, some benefits, I'm sure. We're going to be exceptions now and again because we don't know enough. And the exceptions, I can't put my finger on it for any one person. Say, oh, that's it right there. No, you just get as close as you can get to what this concept sort of dictates. Just using whole plant foods, don't pay a lot of attention, just make them tasty, and go with it. And so, and in terms of trying to identify, what he's doing, what in the body, and getting somebody to tell you all about it, a lot of times that can be wrong. Drugs have side effects, as you know. In fact, it's basically the third leading cause of death in this country, drug side effects. But it's become so dependent on that philosophy of using these strange chemicals, patent them so we can sell them, and then treating all kinds of diseases. When in fact, what I've just showed you here about nutrition, the whole food plant-based diet, in its own way, more or less does the same thing. And so, first off, it tends to prevent these kinds of diseases from occurring. But in the process, and this is exciting, the nutrition that actually prevents these diseases from occurring in the first place is the same kind of nutrition we can use to reverse them. That's what we saw in our model. We can turn against control disease on and off, but just eating those kind of diets. Now, I want to say something here about cancer because this has been a really a big story. And if we just follow all these sort of magical rules and these things, these lessons that we do, they don't necessarily, work in 100% of the case because we don't necessarily know, exactly where one thing might be going wrong. And that's something that happens to all of us. And that's one of the things that bothers me about medicine and medical advice. People say things like that. This is the final solution. This is it. Do that. End of story. We do the best we can saying what we can say, but there are going to be, on occasion, some exceptions because our knowledge is simply limited. But the more I've gotten into this over the last now almost 70 years, the more strength becomes this argument. And so just eating plants, just don't go with it, mix and match it, whole foods, that's really the whole story, if you will. And there's another whole story, a whole piece here I want to mention just in finishing. That is part of this whole discussion. But I just listed all these diseases here. You can see they're all rather different. And they don't each have their own mechanism to work. My wife is leaving here. Okay. So anyhow, that's one part of it. This dietary thing, this whole food plant-based diet, has a big magical wand that seems to relate to a whole variety of different diseases. I just talked in reference to cancer because that's where our research career went. And as time went along, uh, God, especially cardiovascular disease, heart disease, we can reverse heart disease by doing this, as my friend Esselstyn did, and Ornish also did to some extent. And so all these diseases, the really big story here is the breadth of the story and the depth, in the sense that so many mechanisms are all working together. And they don't lend themselves to just being the only thing at issue. So we have to have a drug for it. That's money. So the whole system is driven by money primarily. I'm writing a new book on just to illustrate some of the things I've seen over the years. Unfortunately, the public has been led to believe that, eating this way, just plants, called vegan, vegetarian, whatever you want to call it. I was not a vegan vegetarian, didn't really associate with that concept that much in the beginning because their science was not that good. But anyhow, you can use that word. I mean, obviously, animal rights is an issue. And I'm all for, we don't need to have animals to eat to get their protein. That's nonsense. So just look at the science here. It can tell us everything we need to know. And it works in magical ways and reverses disease. It covers a whole variety of diseases in the same way. And so it's sort of a magical, as I say, magical wand. Just eating the right food. And hopefully later. As I say here, I should be careful how I say this. I'm now 90 myself. And there was my wife is 84, and we have a personal story to tell because back when she was in her late 40s and I'm one of the 50s, I'm getting impressed with this sort of stuff. And we said, well, hey, why don't we eat this way? So we started eating this way. And hopefully we might get years on. Well, I outlived my father who passed of heart disease by 25 years now. By his father, my grandfather, by more than 30 years. And they're brothers. And so heart disease in my family, very heavy. And so I've already gained 20 to 30 years, all of them. My wife's mother passed, unfortunately, at a very young age of 51. I was just starting my career, and that we kind of got me into this area, taking it seriously, working in this area to understand what's going on, because not only did she pass early in her 50s, so did Karen's two brothers in their 50s, father in the 60s. Cancer was in her side of the family, heart disease on my side. And so we each had in our family histories, some bias of probably getting the wrong diseases. So I'm 90, she's 84. She just turned 84 yesterday. And so I don't know how much more we got to go. But I know one thing, knowing the fundamentals of biology and the way it works and the data that we have at hand right now, this works. It really works big time. All the drugs put together could not match this. And so, I've got some data. I don't know whether I have it here or not, but it's very fascinating. You look at some other data. There's another story here too. I told this first. I told this during China study. I wrote that, and it came out in 2005, as you can see there, because my wife knew the flack I was taking, and she just basically told me, "Why don't you sit and write a book for the public?" So that's what the China study was, a book for the public. Later, it's the second part of the story I want to tell, and that has to do with the way all things, complicated things, can be reduced down to work together, and that's the whole story. That we called that book whole. I've got another couple of books we've written too, but anyhow, it turns out that now just one last. I'm not going to dig into that part of it, the whole concept, but there's one part that got left over for our medical system, and the new work I'm doing right now is taking apart and showing the evidence in the medical system has been used basically to make money and take advantage of people, not by the individuals themselves. They just don't know. So medicine, to me, is really fixated on the idea of using single chemicals, working on specific events, and that's it. what's good here, what's good there, but that's really, and they tend to work in a short while sometimes and looking good, but it's a long range effect that we're concerned about. And here I say the medical system talks about one disease at a time, one cause, one mechanism, one target drug treatment, so forth and so on. You get side effects. It's really a rather nasty way of thinking about things. And holistic nutrition is where everything is taught. And guess what? Not a medical school in the United States will teach nutrition. And there's a reason they don't. And I've spoken to medical schools in more than 40 states in this country and more than 30 countries around the world. So there's a concept that's part of our thinking as humans that somehow we're going to fix things by using simple ideas by just, let's say, taking a chemical. And it has to be a foreign chemical because you can't patent, normal chemicals. And so that makes it even worse. So I've got this point here. I got two stories that I like to tell tonight. One is the animal protein thing and its ramification. It's huge. I have to say it's really huge. And the second part of the story, which I haven't got to tell here, is the whole nutrition, everything works together.
Dr. Campbell, excuse me for interrupting, but is this your last slide because it says thank you?
Yeah, I just did.
Yeah. So would you mind now if since it is your last slide, would you mind if I bring you on full screen to talk?
Yes, I was going to say I will save my comments for later. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to hear the comments.
Oh, no,
Bless
no,
you.
no, no. Meaning I want you to keep talking, but what I've done now is I've just changed the view because you were very, very small. So no, please tell your stories. It's just that there was no reason to keep the slides up since you weren't using them. So please tell
Yeah,
your stories.
you're right on point.
And
Exactly.
look, and turn a little bit because you're kind of not looking right into us, the camera
Yeah.
right now.
Okay, the wrong screen. Okay, here we go.
Perfect. Now we can see you.
Okay.
Please continue.
Yeah. I was just sort of finishing off some remarks that, this story about health, it's a big story. It's got a political dimension that's huge. It's got an economic dimension, sociological dimension, and now even an environmental connection, which is even that's an incredible story. That we raise cattle, we raise livestock in the world. I have to tell you, historically, because we value that food supposedly, and it's argued over the years, the decades, that it's got all that good protein. No, we don't need to do that. That causes disease. And I got some data I could show you. I'd love to show you some of that, but it all has to do with the idea of all these nutrients working together, thousands, millions, in reaction, all working together. And there's a way to tell that story I like a lot. And I just showed you the two books there. One, the China study. I wrote that because I was getting a lot of pushback from my friends, and they're getting pretty nasty. And but that's the way it was. And finally, Karen said to me, "Why don't you sit down and write a book, tell the public your story?" So that's what I did. And that's the basis for the China study. Her mother had died of cancer at 51. Karen then, right after, just about that time, of all things, she got melanoma, advanced melanoma, and that's pretty serious. That's often said to be the most serious of all the cancers. She got that. She was into this. We changed her diets. She went to the doctor. He was a big shot, melanoma specialist, if you will, cancer research practitioner. He told her that she had to take some drugs, really potent drugs. She said she wasn't going to do it. I saw his reaction. I saw what he said to her, and I'll never forget it. It's that the reaction that the medical system gets to my telling this story in this way, how we can use food, to maintain health and do a lot of other good things in the process, has not been very popular. And that's another whole story that some of which I'm telling in the book that I'm just finishing now. The kind of things that I have seen at the very senior levels. I've done a lot of work for the government and the regulatory authorities with FDA and National Academy of Sciences, so forth and so on. So I see what happens at the senior level. and it's really engineered by this avarice for money. Wealth is more important than health. Unfortunately, I hate to say it that way, but that's the way it is. And the reason is that doesn't happen because there's got all nasty people out there like doing nasty things. I like to think better of my fellow colleagues in this world, but I think that the problem is that so many people are on the wrong track, not really recognizing this because the system is such that it values money. That's what determines what we know, what we don't know, how we treat people, either in terms of maintaining health or even actually recovering health. It turns out there's a story here that if everybody knew this, it would be enormous. So I just leave it off there. I wrote a book on that, or some more books on that. I'll take the comments of anybody. Yeah, like to learn from other people.
Can you talk a little bit more about Karen's melanoma? Because Dr. Goldhammer was so excited that you were going to be on the show. He said, make sure he mentions something about fasting.
Well, yeah. I'm going to say, I'm glad you said that. And if he's listened, this was quite big for me. When I was early in my career, first job I got was with a small company where I met Karen actually, and they had a contract with the FDA to try to find out in the oil of chicken feed, what was in there that was causing some difficulties like edema. And so it turned out that what was in there, I went to MIT, the FDA guy he brought me to FDA and I set up the lab. And my job was to isolate that compound. And so I did. I breathed along the compound. It was damn toxic, really toxic. Some others gave it a name, dioxin. Well, dioxin is pretty nasty chemical. And it was being used in Vietnam to spray not the dioxin itself, but the spray, the 2,4,5-T sprayed on the leaves of Cambodia so they could stop the soldiers from coming from North Vietnam down to South Vietnam. Anyhow, I got exposed to this compound that I isolated in pure form and got a big dose of it. And I had levels in my blood, according to Canadian authorities, at 800 times the maximum amount allowed. I was working with the really toxic stuff. And I was losing my voice and stuff like that. And it was kind of a mess. And so I heard about fasting, actually from Alan early on. And so I thought, wow, that's a pretty good idea. I mean, fasting to me is a concept that he was developing and articulating and practicing, if you will, allowing the whole body to do its thing, get out of the way. Stop throwing all the stuff that we throw at our bodies and just take a rest. Is the way I sort of looked at it. I mean, you may want to decide to say it somewhat differently, but basically fasting, I just found it being a trick. So I did a fast for a couple of weeks with Alan, and I became really impressed with what he was doing. Basically allowing the whole body, to play this game. And stop throwing the crap at it that we do. And so I just always had a great reverence for Alan's work and what he's been there a couple of times now. Karen went there too after she got her melanoma, and took a break. And now she's 84. The cancer went away, and these kind of things happen. They're pretty commonplace at Alan's fasting clinic. And so I became a big fan of Alan's and the way, both in terms of, personally in a sense of what we were doing together in a way, but also in the sense that it's a concept that science has sort of ignored. It comes out of the chiropractic community, and I also have a fond feeling for chiropractors too. They don't get the recognition they deserve, and that is again is kind of a different thought process. Try to let our bodies do what it should do best. And chiropractor fasting is one way, adjustments and stuff like that. I just so there you have it. I've learned from lots of different people and found that have finally come down to this question of modern medicine. I'm not very fond of modern medicine. the way that philosophically it's constructed, because it's constructed around, again, making money. You know, find one chemical that does a job on one thing, take it, call it a drug, and get on with your life. But that is showing us now that's not a very good way. So I'm kind of fond of the chiropractic community, and some of them do different things. Passing is one thing, adjustments, of course, another thing, and so forth. So yeah, I learned. I enjoyed learning from whether we do it in our lab or whether others are doing it. It's wonderful.
Is Karen completely cancer free now? Does she still go for checkups, or
Oh,
has she completely?
I got a good question. She had that erupted for her when was it? Charge of study came out 2000 in December. I guess it was the fall of 2005, and so that's kind of scary because they diagnosed it as advanced melanoma. You couldn't get advice of worse than that, I guess. And the way that I saw personally what happened was the doctors wanted to give her all kinds of crap, and she didn't do any of it. And that's now been about 20 years ago. It's gone. Near as we can tell. She's in good health.
That is,
And
that's amazing. Congratulations. Jewel, who's watching live, would like to know, what is the name of your new book and when is it scheduled to be released?
we've been going back and forth a little bit. It got the same publisher, and they were quite excited about it. Something it has to do with wholeness, the whole truth. We might meant that. And what I'm talking about is listing in there and showing in detail a bunch of events I've had, experiences I've had, either seen or was involved in myself at very high levels, like with the FDA or with Senate committees or National Academy stuff. I've seen the kind of stuff that goes on behind the scenes the public doesn't get to see. And those things that I've seen, you can argue the case. I can argue the case why they're wrong and why they're doing what they're doing. If I can be allowed to survive until the book comes out, it's supposed to be out next summer. Yeah. So something about the whole truth. I'm a big fan of Aristotle and of the ancient Greeks. Let the whole be the sum of its parts, essentially is what he said. Or Hippocrates said, let food be the medicine. And so, that's a concept that's calling a lot of folks in our day, this way, that way, how it's described. We give different names to that kind of thought. Yeah.
So, you talked about protein and cancer. So when somebody has cancer, should they intentionally eat less protein?
Well, they should be doing it all along. But yes, I would. I mean, that's what Karen did. We were eating more or less a traditional American diet. And no, well, actually, that was when we had stopped that. I was in my early 50s. She's in her late. Yeah, come back. Oh, I'm sorry, getting things mixed up here. 9 years to catching up on me. But when I was really getting pretty confident in this and had the dioxin problem and went to Alan's place and did the fast and the next thing you know, I had it tested. It had gone from 800 times the level allowed down to not undetectable. So my speech problems seemed to go away. I can't say, A caused B or the fasting caused that, but I think that fasting went a long way to really do that job. Where nothing else could, in my mind. And so Karen's situation, she's enjoyed the same privileges in a sense. She it went away, and she just been eating this way. She fixes the food. She's the one that makes her dinner, and all of her kids eat this way. And so it became a story that we all abided by, and all of our grown children, now grandchildren, now a couple of great grandchildren, we're in that camp, one way or another.
Yeah. Just turn. You're not quite looking at me. Just
Yeah, I'm not looking at it.
it's okay. Yeah. Look at me. Look at me. Hello. So, you brought up a really interesting point several times during your wonderful presentation that nutrition is not taught in medical schools. And I thought that there were a few now, at least in the United States, that were having some kind of culinary medicine program or teaching kitchens. My experience recently being a patient in the hospital is that they don't even serve you healthy food there at the hospital.
That's right. You're right, AJ. That's that been a practice for some time. There's in my mind, the way I interpret this whole thing, because I'm not a big fan of modern medicine, to be honest about it, and that is that modality, that conception of practicing health in that way started many years ago, back in the early 1900s. To be honest about it, it tended to be very focused. One try to find one agent, one something that accounted for a disease, considering each disease to be different from all the other diseases. Each had its own characteristic, and then its own treatment. And so we think, and I call it reductionism. It's I'll coin that word, but I call it the reductionism, one thing at a time, as if we're going to solve problems. And it does work. And sometimes it's just absolutely essential that you have to do some things to take care of some of the symptoms that we get. But on the other hand, underlying all of these difficulties we may have experienced from time to time, especially if they're chronic and they're degenerative and so forth, so they come with age. I think just there is one catch-all almost solution. I hate to say that, but eating a whole food, two features: whole food and plant-based. We don't need the animal food. We just don't need it.
Yeah.
And it ties into a lot of really interesting concepts that others have known, emotional concepts and socioeconomic issues, environmental, and so forth. I mean, the whole story gets kind of rounded out with benefits across, from different kinds of perspectives. I find that concept very exciting.
Do you remember? I think it was about 10 or 15. It was at least, I think it was more like 12 or 15 years ago. You were speaking at the USC School of Gerontology, and I was hired as the chef and to make, I think that there was 100 doctors there, and I made lasagna, and it was a wonderful experience. And one guy who was on the panel got so triggered by what you said, he left remember, and he slammed the door. Do you remember that?
Oh, I can't say I do exactly. I've given about 1,400 of those lectures all over the place. I don't, I can't say I did, but kind of blur in my mind if I did. So, yeah.
It just seems that there's some people that just, no matter the amount of research you do or publish on it, they just either don't want to believe or just aren't interested in what you have to say. And that's quite sad.
Yeah, I know. You're absolutely right. And that's the thing I'm concerning myself with right now, because I give a lot of lectures and I try to tell the story about animal protein. And people don't want to hear that. I have to tell you that's a religion. And I can understand that because I was in that community myself, both personally and growing up with it, and then being in graduate school and so forth. Kind of preaching in the choir, preaching that stuff. So that's what part of my story is that if you go by science, if you really believe in science, converting opinions, personal opinions, into facts that we don't own. Opinions that we own them, but facts we don't own them. And so I always saw science as being an effort in various ways of trying to sort out opinions and other statements that people may have, not maliciously, just that's the way it is. And because that was one of them, and doing investigative research in a way in which you got people looking over your shoulders, and you have to defend everything you do, and all that kind of stuff. It's I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Here's a question, and it says, based on your dioxin experience and recovery, what do you suggest for a person who was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam?
Well, that is it. That is what Agent Orange really is. the Army has kept records on the number of servicemen who lost their lives from that spray, right? The last figures I saw was 400,000. It's huge. I don't know how they come up with those numbers. I can't quite agree with that in principle, but I can't say I can't disagree either. But it's been a nasty, nasty, clearly chemical, and others have suffered from that too. But I don't know if there's 400,000 servicemen. That's more than were killed in war in Vietnam by a bunch. And so,
If it's the
like,
casein that causes the cancer, how come cows don't get it from their own milk?
oh yeah, the stuff that our bodies handle is ours, and our bodies learned how to use that. Animal protein, the protein we have in our bodies, and that's what the animals they're using their protein for whatever they do, make milk, whatever. And it's just that's the way nature works. Uh, Somehow nature knows herself, and I don't know how else to characterize it. It's just a magical wand, if you will, resolving extraordinarily, infinitely complex systems from a biochemical point of view or physiological point of view, and somehow making it work. That's an idea that I like a lot, and I wish there was some way to tell that because that story, biologically, I feel like I'm quite comfortable with it, and I've learned a lot about it. But it does have socioeconomic dimensions, as I said. Also, the environmental issues are huge. Let's face it, and especially coming from the farm and knowing what we had to do to try to control erosion. And my dad only had a couple of years of elementary school education, by the way. He's an immigrant, so he didn't have really any education. I was close to my dad, and when I was in undergraduate school and then was going to high school, he took me aside and said, he says he wanted me to go to another school. He didn't have the money to pay for a private school, but I had to drive for the next 5 years to junior and senior high school into Washington, D.C., just over 50 miles a day to get an education that he didn't have. He wanted, he wanted me to get what he didn't have. So,
Well, you sure did it. So thank you and congratulations, and thank you for your work. Kathy, who's watching live, says, Dr. Campbell, when you're recommending fasting, are you specifically recommending water fasting or juice fasting or both?
uh, I'm going, if Dr. Goldhammer is on here, he's the one to answer that question. There's others too, but we need water. We can't go without water. So it's a water only fasting, as he refers to it, and drinking plenty of water. Uh, no, don't you can't go without water.
I've done it twice, and I got to tell you, it was hard. It was very hard. I've done it 2 years in a row, and it's not the funnest thing in the world, but it really does have a lot of benefits.
Did you say water only fasting? You did that?
I did it. I did it. I did it last 2 Octobers. I can only seem to make 4 days. But then I do a few days on just the broth. But I find incredible benefits once it's over. I don't enjoy the experience while I'm doing it because I don't really have any energy. But when it's over, you just feel amazing. And even if you don't have health problems, especially people that struggle with weight or food addiction, your palate is so pure that like I mean, refeeding is like the greatest thing in the world because whatever they give you, whether it's a piece of steamed zucchini or a chunk of watermelon, it's like the best thing you ever ate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, uh, first time I went there, I think it was 13 days, I believe. No, 10 days. I guess it's
You,
10
you,
days.
you you did a 10-day water fast?
Yeah, first time.
Incredible. Yeah.
But I came back again with the first time I did it, was with the so-called dioxin experience. I'm not sure that was my issue, but I had some speech problems at the time. I was losing my ability to articulate, and some have thought that probably was related. I don't know, but anyhow, it got behind me. I did, and then I came back again, did it for a couple of weeks, and came with one time with Karen when she had been diagnosed with advanced melanoma, and a couple of our kids have been out there too, without at Alan's place. And I give stars to
Yeah.
Alan.
Well, you wrote the foreword to his latest book, Can Fasting Save Your Life?
Oh, yeah, I guess I believed it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's another friend of yours that's just texted me to say to be sure to say hello, Dr. Doug Lyle.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Doug is a friend of Alan and Doug are good friends, as you know. And yeah, Doug, yeah, he's a live wire.
Yep.
He yeah, a lot of fun talking to him.
Yep. He thinks the world of you. So you're gonna love this question. As the author of Whole, Becky would like to know, what are your thoughts on supplement, even conservative supplementation? What about B12?
Yeah, I go around and around on that one. The data for me, looking at how things work together like that, doing one thing out of context. Yeah, I mean a drug itself, it's usually a foreign compound, but a drug or let's say a nutrient by itself, sure, you can. There's lots of evidence that the first effects over the first few days, let's say, correcting a problem possibly might work on occasion, but it's not the solution. I mean, I don't want to spend the rest of my life taking supplements or drugs. And on the question concerning supplements, which you just asked about, usually given as single nutrients, although we have multiple vitamin supplements, as you know. Uh, I had a chance to get pretty close to that issue at one point. I was on the National Academy Committee on Diet, Nutrition, and Cancer, and we had what's the guy that got the Nobel Prize? Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling came to one of our meetings, and we were arguing, discussing things, and he was into vitamin C and all the wonderful things you could do, supposedly, and it kind of caught on, and I think I think he went a bit too far with it, but it led to a concept called orthomolecular nutrition. I think now there's a huge industry doing that, and I had doubts about its claims, a lot of claims. It's not to say that occasionally something in the short run, yeah, I guess so, but I didn't. I know Pauling had a big name, and I got to talk to him a bit too, and he went on to develop this concept that all these different vitamins, if we can just identify them and see how they work and stuff like that, we can put them all together in one pill. We'll call it multiple vitamin supplements or orthomolecular medicine, which is a strange kind of concept, but it makes it sound fancy. Yeah, I've never been a fan. I was actually asked, like just throwing it here, another thought. The federal government, in this case, Federal Trade Commission, the FDA, kind of brought me on board early on when there were attempts at that time being made to kind of relax the regulations on vitamin supplements. This was in uh, early into mid 1980s, and I was the chief testifier, I guess, the Federal Trade Commission hearings, and I said there's something what I just sort of said now. I've never completely warmed up to the idea. They sometimes, I keep hearing this all the time. Uh, Beta carotene is good, this or that. B12, of course, has always been yeah, touted because it's water soluble and less likely to be toxic because the body can get rid of it, what it doesn't want. So I don't get too excited about those things. Uh, Beta carotene, I remember when that happened in the early 80s. That was one of the linchpins for me, was that there was a study came out, good study, well done, to show that among smokers, smoking cigarettes, getting lung cancer stuff, uh, that they did a little study on a survey of them and found out people were consuming more beta carotene as indicated in their blood or urine. I forget what it was now, but more beta carotene exposure, they had less lung cancer. It kind of caught on for at the time. Oh wow, beta carotene can prevent lung cancer kind of story. But then a little later, And I got involved with that. And I used that in my testimony for the Federal Trade Commission. A little later on, though, a study came out about 5, 6 years later, showing that when beta carotene was taken out of the food and put into a pill, that it did exactly the opposite and highly significant. Beta carotene turned on the cancer when it's by itself. But when it was in food, as an indicator of the kind of food we consume, beta carotene, of course, is plant-based. It's associated with a lower risk for lung cancer. But when you take it out, use it by itself in pill, it increases lung cancer. And those are statistically significant results. And I can cite some other stories about that too.
Well, please, you can have all the time in the world. We love your stories. I'm curious, this is more of a personal question, but of all your accomplishments in life, what are you most proud of?
Marrying my wife.
Good answer, especially because she's probably right there, huh?
No, she isn't. She's gone.
Oh,
No, I really mean that because first job I got finishing up graduate school, I kind of got taken to her and truthfulness. I should be in, lies have no place in the world. I mean, she really meant it, I could tell. And that was really pretty significant. She had lots of other attributes as well. We've been married now for, what is it? We're going into our 68th year of marriage.
that's incredible. 68 years.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, but she didn't go to college, and neither did my dad, and
Yeah, she was smart enough to marry you.
Well, whatever. She had her what I want to call it, her testaments to who she was, which I liked a lot.
Yeah, that's so touching. Here's actually a question about Agent Orange. Is glyphosate similar to Agent Orange? CN would like to know. Glyphosate.
No, I don't know of any evidence for that. I think I know that the problem is these research studies that are done, uh, especially any kind of research studies that are not peer reviewed. They shouldn't even get in the newspapers, quite frankly, because people get these odd observations. I don't know what you just asked about glyphosate and dioxin, but dioxin does have an effect on, as I think, some diabetic effects.
Yeah.
I don't recall exactly what the details are, but yeah. Can I say something about that? There's something, one of the, if I have a big story that I'm really anxious to tell, I don't mean to offend anybody, but the Supreme Court decision in 2010, the one that was, what was the name of the organization? I forgot.
Was it which one are you talking to? The overturning of Roe versus Wade, or
No, this is the earlier one, 2010. Citizens United. That was a big decision. And what they did, and I got the data to show this here. I'm sure that they're very close link. One of the reasons they wanted to have Citizens United, they won the day 5-4, close call, but I think it was. In any case, they wanted to open up more conversation and allow people to speak their minds. I guess that was the sort of fundamental argument for it. But basically, I have learned since then, in spades, quite frankly, that there are some very serious biases against people in science, who live by rules of the game and try to learn the truth and what it is and all that. We're held accountable for what we say. There's ways to do that. Boy, they nearly killed in academia the tenure system. I find it tragic. I mean, tenure was prominent back in those days, just before 2010. There's polls been taken on this. And I've met some people who, quite frankly, agree it's about time that academics be brought under control. And so I just find that kind of offensive, to say the least. So I don't like Citizens United, to say the least. There's other ways that we can, tell our stories, and if you know they're different, that's fine, no problem there. But to not try to clamp down on systems that have organized in a very formal way, how to report on evidence and how to be truthful about it, being held accountable for biases. I think that's a precious thing in this country. And unfortunately, academia almost, lost a lot after that.
Do you want a fun question, Dr. Campbell?
Yeah.
Okay, not that the other ones weren't fun, but they were more scientific. This is from Vicky, who says you are a legend. She wants to know, what do you eat in a day? Is this just what Karen gives you?
Yeah, that's usually what my answer is, and it's truthful. She is really interesting. When she was getting caught up in this, and she was seeing some of the nonsense that I was getting too, from authority you wouldn't expect to get it from. Yeah, kind of had to think hard. And then with her getting the cancer too, and said we just jumped right in there. And I always said, actually, my early pictures, I said, "What the heck? This, I believe it." So we've been, plant-based.
So what does she serve? What does she serve you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Well, breakfast is always mostly almost the same thing, except for Sundays.
What's Sunday? Hey, tomorrow's Sunday. What's tomorrow? Pancakes?
Yeah, pancakes and fresh fruit.
Nice.
Otherwise, it's oatmeal, hot oatmeal mostly, and lots of fruit on it, fresh fruit. We never get tired of that. I just never start it that way. And lunchtime is, salads and some other goodies that she fixes, hot foods. Dinner time is more or less the same thing. Something,
What's your favorite meal that she makes, or a favorite meal maybe that you eat out?
oh geez, gosh, I don't know. I like the variety. I don't know. I always have to get some vegetables, for one thing, for sure. And what else?
Mm.
I
So
don't know. Chinese, we go to Chinese restaurants quite a bit because they have mostly, at least most Chinese restaurants do. It seems like to me, pretty good dishes.
yeah, very easy to get healthy food there. Since I've known you, even whenever I get a physician on the show or meet a physician, very often when they decided to adopt a plant-based diet, their first point of entry was reading the China study. Lately, maybe more are because of Forks Over Knives, which also you were a big part of. But who was your China study in Forks Over Knives? Like how you know what I'm saying? Like who influenced you?
You mean who did? How did they get into it, or what?
Yeah, because you think, I mean, a lot of physicians change their diet just from reading your book, but you didn't have the China study to read, yet you still made these changes and chose this life path, but there was no Forks Over Knives. How did you know to do this?
Well, that came, by the way, right near the after the China study was just published. So I did have that learning behind me in a way, and I was actually at a session of John McDougall's, and a couple of guys, the guy who became the screenwriter, and who also Brian Wendell, you may know the name, Brian Wendell and Lee Fulkerson, were their names. They wanted to meet with me, and we went to a hotel room and chatted, and they wanted to know if I would do that because they were thinking about doing something like this, if I would join them. And I said, yeah, let's go for it. And Brian Wendell was, I think, the key person making it happen. Lee Fulkerson also was really significant because he did a good job of asking questions and interviewing. And so, yeah, I just and then, oh, yeah, then I started talking about Esselstyn, and I think they may have contacted him at that time, about the same time. I don't know. But anyhow, S and I came in about the same time initially. That's when they kind of kicked the whole effort, off. We were at I had just been at at John McDougall's place, watching there.
Oh my gosh, you have an interview somewhere on your channel where you interviewed Dr. McDougall. It was wonderful. I'm going to try to link to that. I don't know if you remember that, but it was fantastic.
Yeah, I always had a lot of admiration for John. When our China study came out, he picked up the phone and called me, introduced himself, said he was working. Well, it just so happens that I was delighted to get his call because not long before that, I had gotten his 1984 book, his first book, and I found it really intriguing and fun because he was a guy that in the scientific community, he was being, some people didn't like what he was talking about, kind of pushed aside. In any case, I read his book. I said, wait a minute, there's nothing wrong with this guy. And I liked what he was saying, just that simple. And I liked his personal story, how he got into it. So, John and I became, I think, good friends. And he was an MD, I'm a PhD, so a little bit different backgrounds. But nonetheless, we were on that boat. And then Esselstyn came on board. And so S and I became sort of featured in the film.
Did you enjoy being a movie star in your 80s or 70s, whenever that was?
I didn't think too much about that, but I do like to talk about this information, because I think it's kind of exciting, and I don't want it to go to waste. And I think there's a lot that our population can gain, from doing this. So yeah, I'm biased, I guess you could say, but the science, I found the science very convincing. And I also, in more recent times, have become a little troubled with myself of being able to make an argument that I think is very important. And it's the one having to do with questioning animal protein. I have to tell you, I paid a price for telling that story. The animal protein is not quite as good as what we think it is. And if anyone was, telling the good side of animal protein, it had to be me, coming from the farm and the PhD I did and everything else. I was steeped into that and didn't believe it. That's why I told what I told here, because I didn't come into this game, with a big bias in favor of this idea. In fact, if anything, I was on the other side of the fence. I just got convinced of the science. And the science, to me, as I think I said, is that we all have opinions, but we don't own facts. And so science, insofar as experimentation is concerned, is an attempt to convert opinions into facts. And the way that can be done, honestly, if you will, is to have your biases controlled by other people. That's where peer review comes into play. And I was, quite active in that area for some years early on. I think science, just the concept of science, has a lot going for it. Unfortunately, now the darn word is being used this way and that way, some other way, just speaking out fancy words that most people don't know, or something like that. I don't buy that. I think science should be serious attempts to try to learn things, and then be willing to do it in the presence of other people who know a lot about this, so you can be held accountable. Because most of the time we don't necessarily know our biases, kind of creep into our language without knowing it.
Dr.
So
Campbell, have you seen any changes in public health since the publication of the China study? And if so, are you encouraged by them?
yeah, a little bit, not too much, but I do see quite a lot of discussion from time to time about the whole food plant-based diet. I came up with that plant-based thing, as I said before. I was not a vegan or vegetarian. I have some difficulty with that argument scientifically, but nonetheless, so uh, yeah, I kind of, what was your question? I forgot, lost
Oh
trace
yeah,
of it.
have you since the publication of the
Oh,
China
yeah.
study?
So I looked for those words, whole food plant-based. I was on a committee determining with some colleagues, especially cancer researchers, determining, for NIH, who's the one should be awarded funding. Pretty powerful and significant position. And so on the committee, my committee people, colleagues, they're all MDs into the clinical community, but I think they're all of us were sort of in cancer one or another. And so we started getting some applications on occasions with somebody wanting to come in, and this is early 80s, by the way. They wanted to study something about nutrition. So my colleagues, they didn't have any nutrition. They were all wanted to go to medical school, not taught there. So they wanted me to come and spend an hour, tell them what is nutrition, as if I could tell that. And so I had to kind of reformulate some words to tell it like I knew it. And I chose the term actually plant-based intentionally. Uh, vegan vegetarianism is fine. I don't want to be negative about it, but at that time, uh, there were ideas that, at least in the medical community, that uh, the best way to solve this problem was low-fat diets. Well, that's not, and saturated fat is bad, and you can control it, with uh, drugs, and stuff like that.
So, Dr. Campbell, I have some insider information from someone that just texted me and spilled the beans that said that when you were in your youth, you were a pretty wild guy and that you actually saw Patsy Cline perform. Can you talk about that?
Oh my gosh, uh, that wasn't being very wild. It was, yeah, she was living near where I lived and where I lived at the time in the northernmost county of Virginia, just across the border from West Virginia. And my buddies and I would occasionally go out to these bars over there in West Virginia, especially, sometimes in Maryland, near Harpers Ferry, actually. And then there was a young gal that was quite good, I thought. Her name was Patsy Cline. And so, yeah, we listened to her, and I was a fan of her. I thought she was a pretty good singer. First thing I know, she became nationally known. And yeah, I think I spoke to her once or twice or something like that, but I was not a friend. But I enjoyed her singing for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, she was great. Willie Nelson wrote some of her songs like
Yeah,
Crazy.
he,
I think
he
I
sure
Fall
did.
to Pizza. Well, speaking, I just said I'm so hungry. I said I fall to pizza. I meant I fall to pieces. But we were just talking about bars, and one of the viewers wants to know if you think an occasional wine is okay, and would your answer change if somebody already has cancer?
Yeah, I used to have a glass of wine off and on. I wasn't any religious conviction one way or the other. I mean, I liked having a glass of wine, not much. But I have to tell kind of sad story. My brother, who's a lawyer and a physicist, PhD, doing a pretty good career. He in that community, and he was with the industry too. A lot of those, rubbing elbows with colleagues in the community. He got to drink a little bit too much wine, and he was started eating his way. And anyhow, he got too much in my mind, and he passed away of cancer. Now, alcohol has been shown to be pretty strongly related to that as a risk factor. So, yeah, I haven't, I don't, I did drink wine from time to time. That wasn't the issue. But I think, I followed that story somewhat closely with my friend Walt Willett at Harvard. I mean, Walt was coming up with some early data to showing maybe some problems. Some others were too. I couldn't quite buy into it for a little while, but in the more recent years, the evidence has become stronger. That's a that's a promoter uh, of cancers, and it's pretty convincing.
So you're
So,
you're good friends with Dr. Walter Willett?
yeah, we're good friends. In fact, he offered me a job when I was leaving. Uh, what was I leaving at the time? Yeah, I think I forgot what was it, Virginia Tech. Yeah, he offered me a job to come work with him at Harvard, and I almost did it. But yeah, we were good friends. I had him, at Cornell and stuff.
That's great. See if you can get him on my show because I'm really changing my focus to talk pretty much about cancer mostly. We can keep going because I mean, I missed you so much and I love talking to you, but I want to respect your time and make sure there's time for the question that I've been asking everybody. But actually, a good one just came in is, would you make any dietary recommendations if somebody has cancer? Other and like assuming they're already eating whole food, plant-based, no oil, low fat, would you make any further recommendations to that person?
I'm glad you asked that, AJ. I know your situation, and of course, always wishing you the best. But the issue is that I see this in medicine. You know, it seems like too often we get in the question concerning a certain idea is absolutely right, and so forth, and another one's always wrong. There's no exceptions, and this is what scientific research is kind of very much about. You get a couple group of people and you treat the groups differently. Maybe you get a few dozen, a few hundredfold people in a thing you're going to study a question. Not everyone does everything just exactly right. You don't get, I mean, you got one group that's got a whole lot of cancer, maybe the other group very low. Uh, and so you're kind of checking out your hypotheses, if you will. But it doesn't work out 100 to nothing. It doesn't because and you never know, what individuals may do that they don't may know themselves or sometime in the past possibly, maybe occasionally, some genetic tradition, but I think I've kind of unraveled that for myself. It's not so much genes. I think uh, yeah, I lost my track on that one there.
Yeah, so would you recommend like, superfoods or juicing or carrot juice or once somebody has
Oh,
cancer?
yeah, yeah.
Not
Well,
somebody that's following standard American diet, but somebody that ostensibly like me has been eating pretty clean for quite a long time.
yeah, yeah, I know. I've been thinking about you. And I guess the issue, are you sure of your diagnosis really solid all the
Well, I
way?
mean, I did have what's called a core needle biopsy, so I believe that
You did. Oh, okay, that's
yeah,
pretty.
a stage 3 longitudinal I didn't want to have the biopsy, and I had a blood biopsy first, which actually showed it, more than a year ago. So I don't think the pathology report is incorrect. So
Right, okay, well, these things happen, in science, some pretty big things eventually happen, and there's signs of it before that. But you keep in mind, for any of these ideas that we tend to get in medicine, this is right, that's wrong, kind of thing, even including diagnosis and what we do. There's always this is the way it is. There's always some occasional person that gets the opposite result. And I don't know quite how to analyze that, except so that's why we use statistics. We use statistics all the time to compare, let's say, the means of one group versus the means of another group. And we have a mean plus or minus whatever is standard deviation. And so there's always an occasional person that doesn't quite, do what you expect to do. So we kind of rely on use of statistics to help us understand that. And so I'm very conscious of the fact that there are exceptions at times. But that doesn't negate the overall conclusion oftentimes in these kind of studies. It doesn't. Because if the chances are 90% that everything's going to be fine, that's pretty good odds. If it's 99%, that's pretty quite nice. But I know it's a place where we need to spend some time just looking harder to find out the exceptions. Sometimes when we think we see an exception, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. we can go on, and I like that comment one of your colleagues made, I guess, because I thought the same thing. The word hope, I like that word. You do too, I guess. Uh,
Yeah, because my final question is, what message of hope would you share with someone who's currently facing a cancer diagnosis?
that's right. Well, I lived with Karen, that's what she had. She had a really serious cancer. It was advanced, they said. And sometime and so she kind of lived with that. And she was just telling me that when she knew of your story, what went on in her mind from the time she was possessed for quite a while, with that diagnosis that she had. And she said, finally, she just said, screw it, or something like that. you know, she's going to live her life, enjoy it. And so there was something about her temperament that she says now, too, that it was a conscious change in her mind. It really persuaded her to look at things differently. Uh, and everything will probably work out okay. Whatever it is, 99 out of 100, or certainly 90 out of 9 out of 10 times. And so we just don't know all the answers to these questions. There's still some room for the work. And I think what you're doing, what you had, of course, in your case, AJ, you've been more or less doing the right thing, I think. Uh, and there might have been something kind of hanging over in your genes or something from years ago, left you at a little higher risk at some point than the average person. But still, even though that may be true, even though something in your past, you don't know what it is, we don't know what it is, can't be diagnosed, still, this idea of eating this way is the way to go. I mean, if you hadn't been doing this way, uh, you might have been paying the price before this time.
That's what, even believe it or not, and I can't get any of the conventional doctors, to get on board with this, but they have actually said that to me, that my pristine diet and lifestyle is probably why because look, do I look like somebody that has cancer? I mean, I feel
Oh, you know.
great. I just can't believe that for 2 years, supposedly I've got this thing growing in my lung. So I don't know, but I'm not going to give up on the diet now. What am I going to go to McDonald's at this point? It just seems
Yeah,
like
don't do that. Yeah, I think just play the game the way you're playing it, and also pay some attention to having your fun. You have a knack for doing it anyhow, so I can tell you that. It's
oh,
just
yeah.
no.
Well, people don't know that people think of you as an academic and a doctor and very serious, but I have spent time with you outside of these situations, and I know that you have a very good sense of humor, even for jokes that maybe we couldn't tell right now. I know that for a fact.
Don't tell them.
And I would do anything to be able to tell you the funniest joke I ever heard that was told to me by Dr. Clapper, but I cannot tell it on screen. But I think I might call you up after the show if you answer and tell you that, because I remember telling this to Dr. McDougall and right before he died. It is because I love to make people laugh. And that's kind of how I'm spending my time, is just focusing on the joy of living instead of the fear of dying. And the thing that gives me the most joy, other than spending time with my dog and my husband and friends, is comedy. And that's what I do. Every spare moment, I'm in a class. Just
You're a perfect example of that. You got a good generous supply of that kind of mentality. So,
well, thank you. So this has been such a joy spending time with you. And you are welcome on my channel anytime. And I've been texting with your son saying, we got to get you out there more. I feel like this is, have you met Dr. John Scharfenberg, the 101-year-old doctor?
I've heard the name.
I think you should get back into the game of interviewing people. He's a personal friend of mine. He lives near me. And talk about, pristine lifestyle. He's an Adventist, so of course he never had coffee or alcohol or, things like that, and raised in China, so we know how good that diet is. But one of the things I know that's keeping him going is because he's still contributing. He's still, even though he may not be speaking on grand stages, although he is, like at Loma Linda, for example, at their big conference, he just loves talking about it to people. And I feel like you do too. So we need to create more opportunities so that you can share your passion with people, especially doctors in the younger generation.
Yeah, I like that. You're right. I always enjoyed that because, speaking from a stage instead of Zoom, Zoom is okay. But speaking from a stage, you're actually looking at people. And, there's some kind of energy. We all know what that is, I guess. Uh,
Here's the thing. Now, I know it is so hard to travel, and I know that your son Nelson is watching. And I had been asked, I had retired from conference producing on July 7th of this year after I did my 23rd conference with my husband at Weimar. And the minute I retired from producing, somebody, an event producer, hired me to host a conference in Vegas that's happening the Labor Day weekend. And I did talk to you, and I know travel is hard, but I know that Nelson's watching it, and I know that this producer would just, I don't want to say he'd bump the others, but he would move heaven and high water if you decided you could travel to that. So let's talk offline about that, because you'd be in front of a huge crowd with a lot of your wonderful colleagues like Brenda Davis and Dr. Neil Barnard and oh my gosh, I'm going to forget all the different. Doug and Allen will be there. Dr. Will Bolshewitz, Chris Wark, Dr. Christy Funk. So, if you can get there, I can give you the audience. So think about it. If it's possible, because you have so much still in you to share and contribute. I just don't want to see you, not being able to do that.
well, I'll certainly consider that. And thank you very much for planting the seed.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still room in my comedy class for you to join.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Campbell, thank you so much. This has just been an amazing, amazing time shared with you. And thank you, Nelson and Kim, for connecting us. I know it was a little bit hard to get this to work. So, okay,
And
I hope to talk to you very soon, Dr. Campbell.
yeah, well, thanks very much, AJ. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
oh my God.
Nelson,
Mhm.
I would say one thing that he's doing right now, been doing for a while, and
Sure.
was totally better not. Somebody came along, I'm not sure how this eventually arose, but in any case, there's a Oscar award-winning writer who's written a script for a feature film on me, and just waiting right now for more funding and get it off the ground.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you don't.
who are they? I mean, who are they gonna get to play you? Which actor?
Oh, I don't know. There's,
I'm trying to think who would play a young I mean, who's a great actor, dashingly good looking? Hmm. I got to think about that. That casting's going to be very interesting.
my younger son was a theater. That's what he did. We thought he was pretty good before he went off to med school.
Hey,
Maybe he
hey,
could play a part.
everybody that's still watching, who would you get to play Dr. Colin Campbell in this?
There's a guy, I can't remember his name now, but there's a guy who kind of likes this idea. Who is it? Yeah, I've had to, when I think of it, I'll tell you. But there is a guy in the movie community, if you will, the film community, who is quite passionate about this.
Oh,
Gosh,
people are saying Kevin Costner.
yeah,
That's not,
maybe,
that's
yeah, I think maybe that's the one I'm thinking.
I mean, this audience is great. Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. Ryan Gosling. Wow. Yeah. I mean, these are all good. Chris Pine. We'll take any of them. Okay. So you're going to be a movie star again. So that's fantastic. Okay, Dr. Campbell. Well, thank you so much. It's just been a pleasure, a privilege and an honor spending these last couple hours with you.
Thank you much. Had a lot
Abs
of pages.
Absolutely. And thanks all of you for watching day 11 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer. We want you to know that wherever you are in your cancer journey, as long as you're still breathing, we believe there's still hope and that you too can thrive even in the face of cancer. Please tune in tomorrow a bit later at 2 p.m. Pacific time for day 12 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer with Cheryl Crowter, who not only is a cancer survivor, but a mental health professional helping people navigate the emotional stress of cancer. And she'll be discussing how to find resilience when facing a cancer diagnosis. I don't know about Karen, Dr. Campbell, but for me, the hardest part is not the physical symptoms because I have none. It's been more of the, the fear, the anxiety, that kind of thing, the stress. That to me has been the hard part all along.
Yeah, she was telling me that just recently. She had how she navigated, that first few months, maybe more than a year, uh, thinking about it. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
It's
Well, maybe she'll come on and tell her story sometime. So anyway, I'm going to let you go now. Thank you, Dr. Campbell.
okay. Thanks again. Really,
Take care.
really